another huge episode of Triggered. So much breaking news, so much happening. We're actually going to go to our guest, Erik Prince, first, and then do the usual news rundown afterwards. There's a lot of breaking news happening as we speak. The latest on Maduro facing justice, Democrat meltdowns, Tim Walz. We're going to get into all of that. So, guys, make sure you're liking, sharing, subscribing so you never miss one of these major episodes. Remember, if you missed the show here on Rumble, you can go Apple, go to Spotify for all of the top headlines. Also, go over to my news app, MXM News, where you can get the mainstream news without the mainstream bias. But joining me now, co-founder of Unplugged Technologies, founder of Blackwater, Navy SEAL veteran, Erik Prince. Erik, great to have you back on the show, man. How you doing?
Great. How are you, Don? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. I mean, that was a wild weekend. I mean, there's so much breaking news, and you're actually the perfect person to ask about all of that. And we got to obviously start in Venezuela. You know, on the military side, walk us through what made this operation so exceptional from a tactical standpoint. I mean, when you see the 150 planes involved, you didn't lose a plane, you didn't lose a person, most importantly, to go through and just kind of sweep Venezuela, get in and out. It's almost like they didn't even know we were in there. I mean, really amazing. You were a Navy SEAL. You've sure done plenty of this stuff. What did the U.S. forces have to overcome to actually pull off this thing? It seems like a big one.
Well, first of all, the granularity of the intelligence collection to know exactly what his pattern of life is, where he sleeps, on which night, who's going to be around him, what's the threat level, what's the air defense environment, obviously, down to the detail of how the doors open. Does it open in to the right? What's the door made of? What kind of explosive breaching charge you need? That level of detail is extraordinarily difficult. And it's really what happens, when Congress created US SOCOM back in, I think, 1985, they did that to generate a unique funding source to take away money as a limiting factor to allow special operations to have all the unique equipment, the unique personnel and training, and the ability to do and to apply maximum human innovation to pull off something like this. It is incredible to come from the sea with a 150 aircraft strike package to take out all the enemy air defenses, including multi-billion-dollar air defense network that they purchased from Russia, with some new Chinese stuff that was supposed to detect stealth fighters, all of which just got the lights turned out and they got smoked to the point of putting Delta in the building where he was. I see today that the Cuban government even acknowledged that 32 Cubans were killed in action trying to defend Maduro. I'd say the Americans, right, left, and center, should be extremely proud of their military because it performed, and it's really what it shows what happens when you focus on lethality and merit. And fortunately, JSOC never really strayed from that. A lot of the other military did, but they proved it in spades on Saturday.
Yeah, it's sort of nice when you focus on lethality as a fighting force rather than pronouns and transgenderism and whatever else it was that seemed to be the focus of the last administration. I mean, it's amazing what you can actually do with these guys.
You can picture the kind of guys that did the mission, and they did it extraordinarily well, and they should be proud. They will know and remember that story for the rest of their lives. But it's not just that. All the supporting arms, the radar aircraft, the stealth fighters to go in to punch into that enemy air defense network and shred it. So there was a lot of things going bang almost simultaneously as the helicopters are going in. Americans should be proud, and our enemies should fear. It's a great reminder that America still is pretty good at some things, and to avoid that. That day, there was a Chinese delegation in Caracas visiting Maduro, trying to sell more Chinese systems. So those dudes, I'm sure, were in the hotel as the world is on fire around them, and they're saying, holy shit, what is happening? There are some really pissed off Americans right now. So that was a very good thing. The fact that Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were taken is excellent. Maduro was the head of the bus driver union. Chavez, the guy that really socialized, that made that took them down the road towards a communist state. she was Chavez's lawyer. Celia Flores was, and so she turned to her husband, a kind of a reliable stooge, and that's how he was made president. So they were both in on all the narco trafficking, all the nonsense. Her two sons, Flores' sons, had both been multiple indicted already on drug trafficking charges. So it's great that they wind up in the United States, and it's great that they can see trial. There's certainly some back and forth going. I hear that Delcy Rodriguez and Jorge Rodriguez, these are not great people. Their father was
that's the vice president, correct?
Correct, and she's now the acting president. Jorge and Delcy, Jorge is the head of the National Assembly. Their father was a professional murderer, criminal, extortionist, kidnapper who used to make his money kidnapping white European oil workers, in previous decades. So the gangster mentality has not fallen far from the tree. Diosdado Cabello, who's the Minister of Interior, is a very bad dude. I think there's a $15 million bounty on him, and there's a $10 million bounty, I believe, on Pedrino, the Minister of Defense. So I think with the administration, they're certainly negotiating from a much better position of authority, because everyone around there can see, holy shit, the U.S. can reach in here and smack us when necessary. But the U.S. has not had a great track record of paying bounties, but they can change that, I think, in this case. If the interim regime is not behaving, I think then our president can announce to say, look, the $15 million bounty on Diosdado Cabello, and now it's payable dead or alive.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. I know we spoke beforehand a little bit about how, now, because, obviously America has done a really good job of toppling dictators. They haven't necessarily done a great job of filling that void historically once they've gotten rid of the dictator. I mean, Iraq being case in point, Libya, the list goes on and on. How do you think and there's a couple other things I want to unpackage in what you spoke about, because I think they're important, but, how does now, the public sector, get involved? I mean, U.S., whether it's U.S. oil companies, whatever it may be, as they're involved, can they effectuate a pressure campaign to actually make some of those other changes without the U.S. government having to do it?
Yeah, I'm sure the U.S. is putting them on some kind of a timeline to run another election. The fact is, the last election they had, which was a year ago, July, this guy named Edmundo Gonzalez was the figurehead on the ballot. He was only there because this woman, Maria Corina Machado, was forcibly removed, prevented from being on the ballot.
Yeah, she's been on the show. She's great.
She's fantastic. She campaigned the entire time. She is the most fearless woman in all of Venezuela. She really deserves to be the president or have some significant executive role, because she's the one that won the Nobel Prize for tirelessly campaigning for freedom in Venezuela. So I would say that they're going to put them on a timeline for actually an observed, proper election, and let the chips fall where they may. There's another guy that won a previous election that was stolen, Enrique Capriles. You may hear from him again as well. So I just think it's important to move away from the socialist gang that was literally defended by dozens and dozens of communist Cuban agents. That has to go. And so it is a proper, let's say, it's not a regime change operation. It is definitely a regime reform operation that brought a known wanted criminal to justice. And hopefully the rest of them get the message that they too can be in the crosshairs of the USG when necessary. And they might not get arrested. They might not get arrested. They might get something else.
Interesting. It's been interesting watching sort of, obviously, hey, I live in South Florida, right? I mean, the huge Venezuelan population, those people are elated. They're dancing in the streets. The people of Venezuela doing the same thing. It seems like the people of New York, I feel like I've seen so many of the faces before where they're doing the, anti, go into Venezuela, anti this operation thing. But it seems like those people, they were the mask bearers during COVID. They were then Ukrainian flag bearers during there. Then they became Palestinian flag bearers. Now they're Venezuelan flag bearers. But against this movement, it seems like you even recognize the faces. None of them actually look even Latin American. And yet that's happening. But all the places with actual Venezuelan populations, it seems those people are ecstatic. What are your thoughts on sort of
elated?
The difference between the creation that's out there versus what's actually happening for people who have suffered from this regime? I saw Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York, tweeted yesterday, there's tens of thousands of Venezuelans in New York. I'm like, yeah, they're there because they had to flee a regime that was going to murder them. Like, that's why they're there. They're all over the rest of the country because of that, not because
they for a while it was so bad they used to call it the Maduro diet because the average citizen lost 18 pounds because of food deprivation.
Yeah.
I was in Brussels yesterday, and there was 200 Venezuelans with flags in the center of a city square, also celebrating in the middle of a snowstorm. So there's a lot of happy people that they have a chance to breathe free. It is up to them. It's up to the Venezuelan people to finish the job now. The inevitability of the regime, of a criminal element, has been definitely kneecapped. Now I think it's better than I guess going with a full deck of cards and taking them all out right away, and leaving a vacuum. But now the Venezuelan people have to rise up and make sure that they finish the job and restore some semblance of rule of law instead of the gangsterism that's been kind of compounding for the last couple of decades.
So you've been in these war theaters your whole life. You were a Navy SEAL. You founded Blackwater. You understand what's going on there. An interesting point that you mentioned, and you saw yesterday, or I guess the pictures of the Chinese there, probably either making oil deals or selling them weapons. But you said there's Chinese weaponry that was defending this stuff. There's Russian weaponry that defending this. This wasn't just an attack on sort of a third world banana republic, even if that's how that government functioned. These guys were protected by some serious technology, by some serious operators. Again, Cuba's known to sort of have that, militarized, intelligence for a long time. 32 Cubans were killed. They were all there probably doing the same thing in our own hemisphere, in our own backyard. I guess, does that make the operation that much more of a success? Because it wasn't, again, you're not just going after, a bunch of guys that, are farmers. You're going after, up against some of the most, expensive technology in the world outside of the United States.
They had a not insignificant level of sophistication, jammers, good communications, night vision, thermal, lots of man pads, lots of surface-to-air missiles, shoulder fired to take out a helicopter and aircraft. Lots of threats that could have really killed Americans, and they got away. They got in, they got the job done, and got out clean. It was an amazing work. All personnel in the Department of War should be extremely proud of what happened, because it sends a fantastic message to the rest of the world. Because I can tell you, there is no country on the planet that could do what just happened. Not a one.
I agree with that. That's amazing to see. However you feel about it, I mean, just being able to pull off that kind of operation is amazing. I mean, you've been bringing up sort of the issue of narco trafficking. You've brought it to light for years. We've talked about it on the show the last time we were on. How does what actually happened, compared to the operational concepts you sort of envisioned? Because it is a narco regime. It's been killing 100,000 Americans a year because of fentanyl. I mean, it's 2 Vietnams. These guys were actually doing that. Maduro, even before, during Biden, there was still a warrant out for his arrest for narco trafficking. There's a lot of hypocrisy now. The sound bites that they're talking about now versus a couple of years ago when they were in power have changed drastically. But how do you think what happened compared to what you would have envisioned?
Look, there's 34 known, effectively industrial narcotics processing facilities in Venezuela. Not some lab in the jungle, actually commercial metal buildings with industrial power, concrete floors, producing narcotics that get shipped to the United States and to Europe. And so that first step in undoing that was taken on Saturday. The most difficult, dangerous piece was done. And now you can move towards better governance. And so that will ultimately be a fight that the Venezuelans have to have inside to say, are you going to have a rule of law society, or are you going to have a narco society? But that is for Venezuelan patriots to take up that cause and make that happen. The Venezuelan regime was making money really three ways: on oil sales, which have been curtailed, and they might be put under a quarantine so that it's at least closely watched where the oil goes. Second was gold. A huge amount of gold that was mined through a lot of nationalized concessions, packaged and flown to Turkey and to the Gulf. And third was, of course, narcotics trafficking. It was mostly a transshipment point and a processing point. It's not really grown. The cocaine is grown still in Colombia and Peru and Bolivia, but they definitely made money significantly off the trafficking. So you take away or you impair those three flows. The government had limited time as it is. Taking out Maduro was the right thing to do, and now they'll move towards some kind of election, I would imagine, in some months, and try to stabilize the country. But there needs to be reliable security forces that are actually in favor of the government instead of the effectively the gang that was running the country.
Well, yeah, so what message, Erik, do you think does this send to, other authoritarian regimes in the hemisphere, whether it's Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia, and to their backers in Russia, China, and Iran? Because I think that's the part that people are oftentimes missing. Like, they're like, well, get your own oil. Well, why is America's only in there because of the oil? It's like, yeah, why do you think Russia, China, and Iran are there? You think they're in there for anything else other than, the oil or whatever it could be? At least, does this not give us a lot of, control over that also? I don't want China having their oil supply, off of our border and dependent on that and taking advantage of that when American companies built up an infrastructure, spend time, and then they're just thrown out blindly. But what message does this send to the other operators of those regimes in those areas about America and what's going to happen in our backyard?
Well, it's open. I think it would be like opening up a corporate board discussion by coming into the room and laying a loaded .45 pistol on the table. It's just a very different conversation when the other thug regimes see what just happened to one of their former colleagues. And now I'd say they'd be more like a little kid in the back of the classroom, kind of with their head down saying, please don't pick me, teacher. It is a fantastic reinvigoration of the Monroe Doctrine. I like what your dad called it, the Don Roe Doctrine. I think it's brilliant. But look, America first does mean knowing what's going on in our hemisphere and keeping criminal states out of it. The money that Venezuela was spreading around to other super crazy left-wing regimes does actually hurt America, because those countries, when they're suffering under crazy leftism, when they collapse, they tend to send their illegal migrants, their refugees, to America, trying to seek better governance. So it's good governance matters in the Western Hemisphere. We can't run the whole world, of course, but at least we should start and keep our backyard cleaned up and organized.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of the information that we derive from this. What are the intelligence implications now that Maduro's been captured? Again, he was being guarded by Cuban intelligence agents. We took many of them out. So what does stability and law and order look like moving forward? Who can we trust? Who can't we trust? How do you see this playing out?
I'm a fan of Maria Corina Machado. I'm a fan of Enrique Capriles and Gonzalez, who actually won by name the election that happened a year and a half ago. Yep. Beyond that, the jury is out. Those are the people that expose themselves to real risk. Gonzalez's son is still locked up in a Venezuelan prison. It's kind of ridiculous for the other regime people in Venezuela to be complaining about Maduro, that they need proof of life. Well, listen, provide proof of life for a lot of the people that you've locked up completely illegally for the mere desire of speaking free and wanting to oppose a poorly run, corrupt socialist government.
Yeah, no, again, we've talked about it in the past, and I've had Maria Corina Machado on the show. Maduro lost the July 2024 election by, I guess it was like 40 points. She was like a clear winner. They wouldn't even let her be on the ballot, so she put in basically a proxy, the gentleman you mentioned, earlier. But Maduro just stole the election. He ignored it entirely. So what now? Do you think the VP there, who's assumed at least temporary control, do you think they try to do that same thing if whether it's her or someone else comes in and actually wins? I think this certainly opens the door for others who would not have taken the risks that Maria took. Assuming that, if she went to a business to get a lunch, they'd shut down the business for even serving her. She had to do my show literally from a safe room. Just talking about what was actually going on. But how do you make sure that the choice of the people is implemented? Because this isn't a traditional transition process. How do we make it work so we have actual allies in power as well, because I think that's important. Having a narco-terrorist in charge is a lot different than a common sense person who may put Venezuela first for themselves, but will probably realize that being an ally of the United States is definitely their best bet, as opposed to Iran or Russia or wherever it is, especially in the region.
This is where the unique authorities of the CIA should be exercised to the maximum. Because if you think about the continuum of statecraft, you have diplomacy and embassies on one end. They can probably handle 10% of stuff. The other end is the military, right? And they clearly demonstrated they can handle that unusual, extreme situation. But the murky middle, that 80%, is the intelligence world. And you've got to get some CIA stations opened up there where they can observe what the regime is doing in real time themselves, not just depend on Venezuelans reporting and phoning it in, to try to shape the reality on the ground so that you move towards reform, you get towards an election, you can start to rebuild some parts of the security force that are not beholden only to the very corrupt regime, and you kind of pair off the middle that way, and you make deals with the really bad ones that they can leave, or if they want to get it on with our countrymen, they can choose to do that. But it's almost like a plomo e plato offer that they were giving to anybody else.
Yeah, because I guess that's the real question, right? How deep does the rot go, right? If it's just the leader and a couple people, but if it goes all the way down into the generals, into the ranks, do you ever get that chance to go back?
There's like 3,000 generals.
Yeah.
So, and the fact is, even amongst the military, Maria Corina Machado and Mundo Gonzalez, that ticket also carried the day by a vast majority. So even the military was sick of the insane socialists that were wrecking the country.
That's interesting. So, I guess related to all of that, you've operated in conflict zones around the world. What does success look like in Venezuela 5 months from now and 5 years from now, and then beyond that? Because, again, you can have a great operation that's, it's joy, and then, without the backfill, without, sort of the substance there, it can go different directions. What do you think 5 months from now needs to look like? Is that elections? And then 5 years from now, what does that look like?
I would say 5 months from now that the economy is starting to turn around, that all those diaspora that got pushed out because of the social incompetence are packing their bags and they're moving back to Venezuela. Look, Venezuela has unbelievable natural resources underground, more oil, more proven oil reserves than the rest of the world, any other country, unbelievable gold, coal, other minerals in the ground. They have a lot of wealth. With just a semblance of decent governance, the country will attract a lot of people, their economy will roar, and it will be a value added to South America, not a super negative cancerous tumor like it was. So perhaps this was a shot of chemotherapy that the country needed, and now they got to the citizens have to get their act together. The wealthy Venezuelan diaspora have to get off their asses from Florida and go back and start to retake their country.
So, we spoke, a little while ago about sort of, the impact on what it means to the other regimes in the area, whether it's Cuba, Colombia, Nicaragua, et cetera. How do you find this impacts other conflict zones and war zones abroad? Right now, obviously, you got everything going on in Ukraine. You have stuff going on in Israel. How significant is all of this in regards to that? Is there any correlation? Does it change the playing field, so to speak, in any of those areas in your mind?
It's a one-night shot heard around the world because you saw full military spectrum capability, from naval power that can project air power that can come over the beach and smash pretty much enemy air defenses at will, taking out bases, taking out bunkers, taking out strategic targets, including very high-end personnel that you can put on the ground in the center of your enemy's capital and go black bag their president out of his bag.
And by the way, Caracas isn't exactly an easy place. It's not like a flat area like Baghdad or something like that. I mean, it's literally in like a big bowl at 3,000 feet of altitude. I mean, it's a harder target than a lot of other capital cities.
And right, helicopters perform differently trying to hover at 3,500 feet than at sea level. All those things really matter in a really high air defense environment. And it's not like the Venezuelans didn't have any heads up, because you had a Navy fleet, significant naval combat power lurking off their shore for months at a time. So the Venezuelans claimed they were getting ready. Apparently, they were not ready. I did hear a particularly bad fact that a staffer from Hakeem Jeffries called down to Maduro trying to tip them off that a raid was coming. Fortunately, he was already in custody and the big bangs had already happened. But
Are you serious?
If that proves, yes.
I mean, that isn't that treason? I mean,
really
if you
is.
endanger the lives of
really,
American soldiers in real time, I mean, I can't think of how do we find out if it's true, and if it is, how do you actually effectuate real action? Because that deserves some serious accountability.
That clearly the U.S., the NSA tracks all those international phone calls going to overseas locations. If there was one that came from that staffer indicating that if perhaps the Gang of Eight had been briefed, that person needs to be tried and sentence carried out very swiftly and most severely.
Speaking of that kind of stuff, can you talk a little bit more about the Mark Kelly situation? I mean, Mark Kelly seemed to be actively trying to prevent this operation from even happening. He tried, essentially, creating, an insurrection in and of itself, telling military personnel while still, actively involved in the military, even though he's a sitting senator now, to basically disobey the commander-in-chief. Can you talk about that situation and how you feel as someone who's, again, been a big part of the chain of command for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, they were all up in arms just at the prospect of shooting drug boats. These are not fishermen. These are drug boats carrying tons of processed illegal drugs, in many cases deadly drugs, to American waters. And I say good on the Department of War for taking those shots. And they sponsored that very choreographed video to
the sound bites all came in at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It was a choreographed media hit. It'd be very interesting to see who was the money behind sponsoring that. But the fact is, if Mark Kelly had worn the uniform for that long, he understands the Uniform Code of Military Justice and that there is accountability up and down the chain, and there needs to be. And so it's definitely worth looking at it. And a jury of his peers, of other 06s and probably some other flag officers, can determine whether he knowingly, if they actually bring it to full court martial, if there was intentionality in doing that. It's fair to have people looked at for intentionally undermining good order and discipline of the chain of command.
Well, Erik, thank you very much. Really appreciate it as always. Look forward to seeing you in the not too distant future. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you in a little bit.
Okay. Have a good night, Don. Thanks.
Be well, man. Really interesting stuff.
You bet.
And guys, my news rundown is coming up in just a few moments. But first, check out all the latest predictions on Polymarket. So if you follow politics, everyone's got an opinion. But on Polymarket, you actually get real odds on what's likely to happen. Polymarket is a prediction market where people trade on real events, elections, debates, policy moves, and it doesn't stop at politics. There are markets on the economies, tech, sports, pop culture, and so much more. It's all live, it's transparent, and it gives you a real-time indicator of what people really think is going to happen. So go give it a look at polymarket.com, check it out, and let me know what you think. Now, guys, while Democrats are busy crying about norms and international law, you know who is actually celebrating? Common sense Venezuelan Americans who've been waiting for this day for decades and who are ecstatic. In Doral, Florida, okay, a place where we have a huge golf course, so I'm there all the time. I see the people of Venezuela. I know them. They've talked to me about this for years. They love it. But also in other cities around the world, they were waving both American and Venezuelan flags. They were crying tears of joy. That's the difference, guys, between real leadership and the pathetic weakness we saw last year under Biden.
Régimen de Maduro se fue. Tío Donald Trump. Gracias, tío. Gracias, tío. Viva Venezuela, coño. Viva Venezuela, hermanos.
Gracias, Estados Unidos. Gracias, Donald Trump. Mi país es libre ya.
Again, guys, that's the difference, okay? We went from pathetic weakness for the last 4 years under Biden to that. And the people who know, the people who are impacted the most, they get it. And if you didn't know, well, now you do.
Aquí lo espera en Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
And now, if you don't know, now you know.
Venezuelan Americans, again, people who actually lived under Maduro's tyranny, are celebrating in the streets, while Democrats in Washington are having a complete and total meltdown. But of course, if my father cured cancer, the Democrats would be pro-cancer. They'd say, he's not giving the cancer cells enough time to develop and to become nice, good cells. They'd come up with something. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, a guy who has never met a criminal that he didn't want to coddle, came out and said the operation was reckless. Reckless? You know what's reckless, Chuck? Letting 100,000 Americans die from drugs every year while you do nothing at all. That's reckless. And back in 2020, just so we understand where things go, back in 2020, this was little Chucky Schumer talking about the Maduro regime. And let's just say, it did not age well.
Not know that he was being recorded? Listen to what he said about President Donald Trump and Nicolas Maduro in 2020.
He brags about all these things he wants to do or is doing, but his actions belie his words. And the president brags about his Venezuela policy? Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began.
Fast forward 6 years to right now, the Maduro regime is done thanks to President Donald Trump. And here's what this guy said today.
We have the War Powers Act. That's a privilege resolution, which means the Republicans can't block it. Tim Kaine and I and Rand Paul are sponsors of it. It's going to come to the floor this week. And if it is voted for, if it's voted positively in both houses, then the president can't do another thing in Venezuela without the okay of Congress. We have to pass.
How do these Democrats do it? It must be exhausting keeping up with your own hypocrisy.
But wait, guys, it gets better. Tim Kaine? Oh yeah, remember him? Hillary's running mate? He's almost as bad as Tim Walz. He called it a sickening return to American dominance in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, I don't know. I kind of want to be dominant in my own hemisphere, but that's just me. I'm not a freaking insane soy boy libtard Dem. Of course, if Democrats had their way, we wouldn't do anything other than spend billions of dollars on USAID money, on queer musical theaters, in programs in Caracas. That was the Joe Biden policy. We'll spend $100 billion to bring the trans movement to Venezuela and hope that that somehow effectuates change. No. Now we're going with action. And as for Joe Biden, well, he doesn't even know what day it is, but years ago, before he became dementia-riddled, he actually wanted to do exactly what Team Trump accomplished. But we know Biden could never have pulled it off.
And we are fighting and losing a war on our own soil. Let's go after the drug lords where they live with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it.
How the times they are a-changing, folks. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, think about it. There was a time where Democrats actually weren't insane. Can you believe it? Like, that actually existed. That was a thing. And the same Democrats who spent years telling us that Trump was a threat to democracy, that he was a dictator himself, that he was dangerous, are now mad that he's too tough on dictators. Remember, no kings, guys. Now they're defending dictators. I mean, it's rich, it's stupid, but you know they're never gonna appreciate the full irony of this. Kamala Harris herself condemned the operation. For no actual reason, of course, and I'm sure she couldn't articulate it in anything other than a ridiculous word salad. And she seemed to forget that she herself also endorsed the bounty that was actually on Maduro's head. So when my father actually removes a real dictator, a fugitive, indicted in a U.S. federal court in the Southern District of New York, guys, so this is not exactly a conservative venue, okay? A guy who stole elections, quite literally, lost by 40 points, didn't matter, imprisoned his opponents, trafficked drugs, sent us Tren de la Aragua gang members, human trafficking, drug trafficking, violent thugs, and literally starved his own people? Suddenly now it's different? I mean, Trump derangement syndrome knows no limits. They don't care. Trump can do anything. He can do the greatest things in the world. It does not matter. They cannot be satisfied. They cannot accept it, and they never will. And meanwhile, the communist mayor of New York, for some reason, thinks his opinion on this somehow matters. I guess communists do like to show solidarity to one another, especially when one of them gets captured. As it turns out, Mondani's staff has a lot in common with the Maduro regime. They both hate private property, they both hate freedom, and they both hate rugged individualism. And honestly, I guess they're not a fan of white people either. Their words.
I think the reality is that for centuries, we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good. And we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently. And it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one.
Yeah, guys, remember, that's their words, not mine. That was Mondani's tenant director in her own words. I mean, think about that. We're going to make sure we impact white people more. We're going to make sure. I mean, these people are insane. And so much of the left is just entirely fake and manufactured. While Venezuelan Americans were celebrating in the streets, while families who fled Maduro's tyranny were crying tears of joy, you know what some of the leftists in America were doing? They were paid protesting against the operation. Of course they were being paid, guys. Of course they were. We all know it, right? They just changed the flag. Nothing changed. They get a paycheck, they grab a flag, they protest. It's not real. It's all fake. And they have no idea what they're actually talking about. Now, they're there protesting for the cause, but they can't tell you a thing about it because they're just paid to show up, to make it seem like they're doing something, to make it seem like they care so that the media will use them, try to show how terrible this is. This is the sentiment of the people. It's not, okay? They're paid to show up and to be against anything and everything that Donald Trump does. It's all part of the left's fake outrage, fake protest, and fake organizing machine.
What do you know about Nicolas Maduro?
I don't know much, bro, but I'm here with Central CSO, and we fight against all this with like the Trump administration, ICE, police brutality. So we're just here in support of all that right now.
And what does Maduro have to do with all that?
Shit, bro, but we're here in support.
I mean, it makes sense. Nicolas Maduro is responsible for almost 8 million people leaving Venezuela, like a quarter of their population over the last decade. I mean, he's contributed a lot, right?
Yeah. But, we just here supporting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, go Nicolas Maduro. Can we do that? Let's do it. Go.
We're just here with an organization, obviously some sort of, probably Soros-funded super PAC, just doing what we're told. We don't know anything about it. We can't tell you anything. Seems like a great guy, I guess, but I wouldn't know because he doesn't know anything. That's what they do. Every time. If you did that, that's not an anomaly. That's probably everyone there. You're certainly not going to find actual Venezuelans there. The Democrat Party is in a state of complete delusion. Tim Walz, by the way, now isn't even running for re-election after Nick Shirley was on the show last week, exposed Walz's Somali daycare fraud scandal. because he doesn't want to be bothered with, running an election. He wants to really focus on the work at hand, which probably means funneling more of your taxpayer dollars into the hands of crooked Somalis who are operating vacant daycare centers. That's probably what he wants to focus on. He'll probably run a super PAC for them. They'll put him on CNN and MSDNC and the usual suspects. He'll have a great life for defrauding the American public. Hopefully, the FBI, the DOJ gets their act together and actually does something about it. We'll see. I imagine there's plenty of evidence, so let's hope that there's some accountability. And Democrats like Waltz, a few months ago, were shouting, "No kings!" The usual, again, the no kings thing. But now again, they're upset that drug trafficking dictators are being captured. Think about how insane that is. Who's more of a king, Donald Trump or Nicolas Maduro at that time? They're siding against angel families. They're siding against victims of drug overdoses. And they are against making the Western Hemisphere safer for the American people. As my father put it perfectly, the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal. But we've superseded it a lot. We've superseded it by a lot. Now they call it the Donroe Doctrine. I like to call it the Trump Doctrine. Even has a better ring, but I guess the first one's a little bit more historically accurate in that it rhymes. American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. And that's exactly how it should be. For too long, we let communist dictators run wild in our own backyard. We let Venezuela become a client state of Russia, Cuba, and Iran. We let them poison our streets with drugs and flood our borders with immigrants. They didn't send us their best, folks, by the way. They didn't send us their best. They sent us Tren de la Ragua, okay? Some great ones came over because they fled because they lost their businesses and everything, and they built in America. But the ones that the regimes were sending us, not awesome. They didn't even want them there. Democrats spent 4 years telling us that America couldn't be energy independent, that we needed to beg OPEC and Maduro for oil, that we had to be responsible global citizens, responsible global citizens, and let dictators walk all over us. And what did we get for it? Record high gas prices, 100,000 fentanyl deaths a year, millions of illegal immigrants pouring across our border, crime, human trafficking, and a world that didn't respect us. In less than a year, my father has completely reversed that. We're energy dominant again. We're respected again. We're feared again by the people who should fear us: the dictators, the terrorists, the drug traffickers, and the thugs. And the Democrats' response? To side with the narco-terrorist dictator and to cry about international law. This is who they are. This is what they believe. They would rather see America weak than see my father and ultimately America succeed. But guess what? The American people spoke last November, and they're seeing the results. Promises made, promises kept. And the message to every other despot, every other dictator in the world is now crystal clear. You're not safe if you traffic drugs to America. If you threaten American interests, and if you think you can hide, you may want to think again. My father has made it clear America is back, and we're not asking permission anymore. To the Democrats, you can keep crying about international law all you want. We've seen how you run roughshod with American law whenever it suits your interest. I've been through it myself. The American people see through your garbage. They know you care more about protecting criminals than protecting Americans. They know because you tell them every day. And they're going to remember that in 2026 and in 2028. And to my father and to the incredible military special forces, the FBI, the DEA, and everyone involved in this operation, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to do what needed to be done. Thank you for putting American lives first. Thank you for showing the world what American strength really looks like. This, guys, is what winning feels like. Get used to it. Guys, as always, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember to like, to share, to subscribe, okay? Get this out there. You're not going to see this on the mainstream media. They're going to show you the, Ukrainian protester that turned into a Palestinian protester that now turned into a Venezuelan protester that was, one of the guys protesting back in, you know the deal, the usual stuff. They're going to show you that. So remember to like, to share, to subscribe. It takes you 2 seconds. Send it to your friends. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify Podcasts. If your friends get their podcast that way, make sure they are aware. Also, don't forget about our incredible sponsors down below in the video link, in the description down there. Check them out. It takes guts to support a show like this. Make sure to support those who share your values. Stay strong, stay informed, stay engaged, and always stay a little bit triggered. Guys, I'll talk to you again on Thursday.